We are back, and last time Joey went to visit the doctor. He stuck Band-Aids all over his belly, and the doctor and special ed were talking about how they need to, they need to start figuring out what kind of medication Joey needs. He needs to get a test on his brain, and he needs to start working on eating more vegetables at home, and you know, working on his behavior. So, chapter 12 is called Pittsburgh. After I had talked to Mom, special ed spoke with her about going the next day to the hospital in Pittsburgh. When she came home from work that night, she had a new slacks and shirt outfit for me, but it was for the hospital visit. "I want you to look good," she said, and examined my head. "I always feel my best when I look good." Early the next morning, when it was still dark, we got all cleaned up, and I dressed in my old jeans and a Penn State t-shirt for the bus ride. I took my meds, and Mom drank coffee while she made sandwiches and packed them in our travel bags. By then the taxi was blowing its horn, and once we got it in it, it took us to the bus station. We were the first in line. After the driver opened the passenger door, we went up the steps. I had been on special buses, school buses, and city buses, and of course the special ed bus, but I had never been on a big Greyhound bus before, and I was very excited, not just because it was a bus, but because it was named after a dog. We had our choice of where to sit. I wanted to sit all the way in the back and have the whole long seat. "No," Mom said, "the bathroom is back there." She pointed at the tiny silver room, "and they smell funny. Get a spot in the middle for the best ride." "How do you know?" "Your dad and I took lots of buses," she said. "We went to Harrisburg, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Baltimore, all over. He was always on the move." "Do you think he's in Pittsburgh?" I asked. "Honey, he could be on the moon. I just don't know," she said in a voice that said she didn't want to talk about it. "But if he is, don't get your hopes up about bumping into your dad in Pittsburgh," she said. "He wouldn't know you if he saw you." It hurt to think that he wouldn't know me from any other kid, so I tried not to think about him or even Grandma. Already I had enough scary thoughts to worry me about my brain, about being messed up, so I tried to think of something good like Mom told me to do. Just one good thing. I leaned my head against the glass and fell asleep. That was the best I could do. When I woke up, Mom wanted to know if I was hungry. I was, so she got the food and opened the dog book, which I had brought with me. "Don't you think you should do your homework first?" she asked, but it was more of an order. "After we eat," I begged, "then you can help me." "Okay," she said, and spread out the paper towels and sandwich on her lap. "But no tricks. You have to keep up, like Mrs. Maxey said." I flipped through the pages of dogs. "I like this one," I said, pointing at a Chinese crested. "It only has fur on the top of his head," she said. "Looks like a troll doll." I didn't care about that. This was the puppy I really wanted, I said, and pointed to a brown chihuahua. "Is there a Joey puppy in there?" she asked, then leaned over to kiss me and tried to be sneaky and check my bald spot again. "I know how to be your puppy," I said, and jerked my head away. "After you were gone, I started asking Grandma when you were coming back, and she said, 'Any day now, I suspect.' And she would set a chair in the front window, and every evening I would sit there with my toys and stuffed animals and books, and I'd wait. Grandma wouldn't let me out of my chair, so I stood on it, kneeled on the seat, scooched it around backward, and rode it like a horse, and all the time I kept my eye on the sidewalk, looking for you. And every now and again, a woman selling cookies or magazines or raffle tickets would come up the sidewalk, and I'd spring forward and flatten my face against the window. But I didn't know what to look for because I didn't remember you. So I yelled out to Grandma, 'Is that my mom?' 'Joey,' Mom said, 'is this going to be about Grandma treating you bad?' 'Yes,' I said. 'You've told me this before, and it hurts me to hear it over and over,' she said. So I was quiet. But it was the kind of story that doesn't go away after the first time you tell it, so you have to tell it over and over until it goes away for good, if it ever can. I looked out the window and thought of special ed and acted in my mind like I was speaking to him because I hadn't told him yet, but I planned to. Grandma would tease me all the time while I waited at the window for Mom. 'Look at you,' she'd say. 'You're like a little puppy.' And she made me do puppy tricks. 'Roll over,' she'd command, and I'd get on the floor and roll over and over until I'd bump into the wall. 'Sit up,' she'd shout and clap her hands, and I would, with my little arms in front of my face and my wrists curled like paws. 'Bark,' she'd say, and if I didn't, she'd get the fly swatter and swat me across the bottom until I sounded like a pet store full of dogs. There was one command I did like. Beg, she'd snap, and I'd begin to whine like a dog, going, please, 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 until she'd give me a hard candy that she'd swipe from the handful from the fishbowl of free candy at the bank where she cashed her Social Security check. I loved that candy, and I'd beg and beg until I got it all. Sometimes she'd get so mad at me for not being good, she'd pretend that the phone rang, and she'd hold it to her ear and say, oh, yes. Oh, that is so wonderful that you're coming home. When? Tonight? Oh, Joey will be so excited. And I'd be pulling on the phone cord trying to get the receiver so I could yell, hurry up, into it. But Grandma would hold it tight and stiff-arm me with her other hand, and then she'd say, what? You want him to take a bath and then sit nice and still and not fidget in his seat? Okay, we'll try. Then she'd set the receiver down, and I'd pick it up and yell, Mom! Into it. But she had already hung up. Now don't let your mom down, Grandma would say, and I'd run to the bathroom and scrub myself red, and when I was perfectly clean, I put on my pajamas and sat in the window chair, and if I'd wiggle just a little tiny bit, Grandma would say from across the room where she was doing crossword puzzles, see, I just saw her walk by, and she saw that you weren't sitting still, and she just kept walking because your mom does not want to come home to a bad boy. That's not true, I'd scream, and I'd get so nervous I'd pull my hair out. Not fistfuls, one little tiny hair at a time until I had a round, bald patch on my head. I knew it was bad, but I couldn't help it. And then Grandma would pick up the phone again and say, what? You aren't coming back until he learns to not pull his hair out? Okay, I'll tell him. Did you hear that, Joey? And by then I'd be crying because I hated myself so much for not being able to sit still and keep my hands in my lap. And then Grandma would say into the phone again, but you're willing to try again tomorrow night? Oh, that is so nice of you, dear. You're a saint to love this boy the way you do. I'll see to it that he's in the chair by the window. Yes, I'll tell him you'll be passing by to check on him, and if he's sitting still, you will come knock on the door. So Grandma was trying to get him to behave, which is a good thing, but she was tricking him. It's kind of sad, right? He was a little kid. He couldn't control himself. All right, well, the chapter is long, of course, the long chapters in this book, so we will pause here and see what happens next time.